Talk about people that hold Hollywood's dark secrets. Well, sadly nowadays there are few and far between. We're talking, of course, about the wonderful golden era, as we like to describe it, of Hollywood, the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, possibly up to the middle 60s. By the 70s it became very corporate, and of course people had all moved on. The big shots, the studio bosses, the moguls that ran those studios with an iron fist, and if you were lucky enough to be signed to a wonderful 7-year contract, made famous, made rich, and if you behaved, you might even get another contract. But eventually, as all major stars found out, whether you be at Fox, RKO, Columbia, or Universal, MGM, you eventually got booted out. And this man, yes, sadly, who we've lost at the wonderful age of 97, Jay Canter, was one of the last of the big Hollywood agents. And I was lucky enough to meet him. Let me share some memories with you. Morning, good to see you. Thank you so much as ever for joining me. Nice to have your company. And we'll have a lovely wave. Yes, we're in Parliament, you can see, can't you? Beautiful, isn't it? Nice and lush and green. A lot of people say, when you've met these people, what were they truly like? But when I meet people like Jay, for instance, who had a wonderful, illustrious career, he literally had worked with the greats. We're talking about the beautiful Grace Kelly, the very, shall we say, difficult at times Marlon Brando, and of course the quintessential, eternally beautiful Marilyn Monroe. Now Jay was really sort of revealing in his sort of chats about people, because obviously by the time I met him a few years back now, he's got to a certain age, and you get to that point, don't you, where you can just tell the truth. Why do you need to mask it? Jay was very lucky, as he pointed out to me, because he literally started at a period where a lot of stars were just coming through. His big break, he told me, was the fact that he got very friendly with the method acting sort of school in New York City, which was frequented by so many big names like Eli Wallach, Carl Walden, Marilyn Monroe, Marlon Brando, and they all went there to become real actors. He admitted to me he found it quite strange, in fact, because Lee Strasberg, along with his wife, ran this particular school. And as he said, it found a lot of big talent, but at what cost? A lot of the natural talent could have been knocked out of them. He mentioned Marilyn Monroe, and he said she was instinctively one of the best comedians he'd ever really worked with. She knew how to work a line, knew exactly when to be the foil, and he said she was nothing at all, like so many people have told me, like the dumb blonde that she played on screen. He said what was interesting, she always spoke about herself in the third person, like, well, Marilyn wouldn't do this, but Marilyn might do that, and that sort of stuff. He said she was a very savvy businesswoman, and in a different era would become a mogul herself. He said he wasn't surprised when she set up her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions, alongside the photographer Milton H. Green. He said, but sadly for her heart ruled her head, and of course eventually she fell in love with the playwright Arthur Miller, and all of that sort of thing fell apart, and eventually she went back to Fox simply to become the dumb blonde, something that she tried to push away from. Marlon Brando, he said, was a totally different character. He really started to believe he was the characters that he was playing on screen. And it was funny, because I'd never met Marlon, I'd sort of thought, wow, what he was like. And he said, look, everybody at that point in Hollywood was pretending to become serious actors, but they were all after serious money. And Marlon was no different. By the time he'd made things like The Wild One, which of course was the precursor to the brilliant James Dean, alongside of course A Streetcar Named Desire with the wonderful Vivien Leigh, as he said, he kind of knew his worth. Grace Kelly, he pointed out, was a totally different animal. He said she knew, all thanks to her father, her worth and her beauty. And as an agent, as he pointed out, she was a tough cookie to deal with, simply because she knew what she should be paid. As Jay also pointed out, he worked with some other huge agents like Lou Wasserman, Henry Wilson, who created so many of those male stars that people still love today, like Rock Hudson and Tab Hunter. This guy was a font of knowledge, and I will find the video eventually, because he was just a wonderful person to sit and chat with about what it must have been like to be literally there at the Stork Club every night, or indeed the Copacabana, going to those wonderful premieres at Grauman's Chinese Theatre. And as he said, when you get older and people ask you about these people, it's very hard to think of them in the way that they were icons to you and I. He said because, to him, there were clients, difficulties, and more importantly, he said they were always arguing about money, prestige and power. but he understands why they lasted so long and why they still remain in so many people's hearts today. And I thought that was charming in a sense, because as he said, I look back and there they are still beaming down on posters in art galleries and their films being shown on all these wonderful retro channels. He said they could never have believed or assumed that their popularity would have carried on for so long. Marilyn Monroe, he told me, was simply grateful for the fact that she got a movie contract. Never in her wildest dreams did she believe that she would become an icon of beauty. A little bit like Frank Sinatra and his voice, and so many of the other greats like Humphrey Bogart. Canter at 97 truly had lived a life. He'd married well, including the daughter of a studio boss. He practiced what he preached. He truly was a one-off, a wonderful gentleman to meet, and boy, what dark tales of Hollywood did he tell. Neil Sean in the very heart of Parliament.